look, I think a lot of folks are throwing Arsenal into the loud ring,
Right.
of potential landing spots for Dominion because of what they've gone through on the injury side of things. Gunners losing Minima to an ACL, saying she announced that she ruptured her ACL, and that's what brought her out of the game against Arsenal during their Champions League matchup on Thursday, December 15th. I think in the moment, watching it happen too was just really, really heartbreaking. Just gutted for this player. We talk about these athletes, and these are people who know their bodies so incredibly well. And you could just sort of see, if nothing else, in the body language of things in the moment, that it probably wasn't going to be good news, or at the very least was a painful moment for Minima. So to see her kind of come out of the game and then have this update from the player of it's a ruptured ACL, it was tough. And it also it was another one. I hate to be that way, but it's like this ongoing list of ACL injuries for players globally. This isn't just like continent to continent, country to country kind of thing. It's everywhere. Like 2022 has had a massive um collection of players who have been dealing with various ligament injuries, ACLs
Yeah.
specifically. I've lost count at this point. I know it's got to be over 50 at some point. Like it's yeah, it's a lot. And there's been a lot of great stuff that's been written about it out there. I know Samantha Lewis has some good stuff, and Sam Mewis actually talked a little bit about climate change and the impact of that on the game, and you could catch that at The Athletic. So there's a lot of it's on the radar, is what I'm saying, in terms of this possibly even being considered like a little bit of an epidemic across women's pro sports.
I know. It's devastating. This is an injury that has unfortunately followed soccer around as one of the sports that gets hit with ACLs more than any other sports. And it is often females versus males that get hit with this injury as well. And there are so many ACL prevention knowledge and education and resources and PT and strengthening that you can do out there. But I think there becomes something deeper when you have over 50 notable women's soccer players being hit with this injury, all within such a short amount of time. That's what's crazy between Miedema and Mead, and then even the United States players. There are so many US internationals that have also been hit with ACL injuries just this year. I mean, it's devastating, and it's really heartbreaking for those players because it's not such a simple recovery. We know how long it is. We know how difficult it can be. And that's something that I'm hoping that the sports psychologist people out there and sports science people are taking a look at the conditions that these athletes are playing on, whether it's turf, whether it's grass, whether it's hard frozen ground, because all of those things play a factor into it. The shoes that the athletes are wearing, whether they're playing soccer and their football cleats and their boots that they're putting on, or it's their running shoes. There are just so many factors that come into this. And in order to have these players be at the very top of their game, this is something that needs to be taken a deeper look at. And I know there are people out there doing that, but it needs to become not 50 people in 1 year getting hit with this type of injury and suffering this. It needs to happen sooner and better with different science or a different look at how these players are training and recovering. And they play a lot of soccer, right? They do. And is that a factor of it? I mean, it's devastating. I've had a handful of knee injuries myself, and it sucks. It sucks. I'm going to be very frank. It sucks.
Just to put it lightly, right? It sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. You're sidelined from for these players, their career, their job that they're doing right now, their passion. And not only that, but it's impossible to get around when you're doing that. And now all of your recovery and all of your time and your energy goes into recovering in PT and getting back to being at the top of your games. An impossible task that seems like it's an incredible uphill battle. But in a little bit of a transition here. One of the players that has suffered an ACL, Catarina Macario, it has been reported that she is coming back and she's working really hard and she's recovering and she's expected to be back
Yeah.
pretty soon at this point. We talk about it in towards the end of December, but in terms of trade and what could happen there, this is another rumor, Sandra, I want to throw at you.
Yeah.
Catarina Macario, her contract with Lyon runs through the end of the summer of 2023. There's been some trade rumors that she could be going somewhere else. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I want to like even humor the trade rumors. Because I mean, you preface this perfectly, in my opinion, because it's not so much that it's a rumor mill versus just business as usual. I mean,
Yeah.
Macario's contract when she signed and made the decision to go pro, signed with Lyon, and that contract was going to be up in 2023. So, and I think even prior to landing on Lyon, the clubs that were interested even back then were Bayern Munich and Barcelona. So if anything, it's just more of a regurgitation of what happened 3 years ago. Where's Catarina Macario going? Is it going to be Lyon, Bayern, or Barcelona? And now that's being repeated now 3 years later.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because you know what? The contract is almost up. So we should talk about that a little bit. World Cup, right? Big year. Catarina Macario, a player who has been a part of US women's national team camps and rosters for quite some time now. A player that they are clearly, invested in and with, in terms of, being an integral part of the team. And yeah, tying this with the ACL news and injuries, we've chatted a little bit about this, as when it first happened in June. And I think one of the things that has happened anytime over the course of 2022, when we have had to find ourselves chatting about player injury, we've also had to chat about it in the sense of the potential timeline of things. And I think at this point in time, when we're talking about big injuries to players, like other big players like a Beth Mead or a Viv Miedema, like, we're looking at that World Cup in front of them.
Yeah.
And that essentially puts things in jeopardy because of the timeline of things. And then when we maybe look at somebody like a Catarina Macario, I think it also depends on the level of ACL injury. Is it a partial tear, a full tear? We're talking about ruptured ACLs, my goodness. This injury occurred for her in June of 2022. So this timeline of us potentially seeing her back in the mix for the She Believes Cup or post She Believes Cup, even, I think is very promising for the US women's national team. And I think it could also be very promising for the direction in which she wants to take her career. I think a player like Cat Macario is at this point, we're talking about two different players, right? We're talking about a Dabinian, where she wants to take that next step of her career as someone who's sort of in her prime, and then versus somebody like Cat Macario, who is probably still developing and but also nearly equally as talented, right? So we're just like, where could she go? Does she want to come back stateside? I mean, we're talking about a league that has continued to grow in NWSL. There's not one but two California sides now, and it's not just your pick of 10 teams, who could potentially want to add you to the mix, but 12. So I would imagine that because of her injury right now, I would imagine that because of the World Cup in front of her, she's going to take a look at everything in terms of all the options that are out there. But the Lyon group, they're going through a transition themselves. They're going to have new ownership. That was, a bit of news that, if you're talking about a club that has, frequently invested in its women's side, Jean-Michel Aulas has basically said that there's been a switch in ownership. They're going to transition. He's going to stay on for at least 3 years as president, to kind of keep his term going on and to probably aid in the transition of things. So what is that going to mean for things like a negotiating period or anything like that? I would imagine that stalls things as well. So we'll see if this is just like I said, like it's a little bit of Back to the Future. Like we were first talking about Macario going pro? Was it going to be Lyon? Was it going to be Bayern? Was it going to be Barcelona? And like here we are again 3 years later. There's
Same
potential for that again.
conversation.
Keep it going. Yeah, no, I would love to see it. Do you
And
want to
and
see her land? Or do you want to see her land?
I mean, this is a type of player that I like. This is maybe a cop out answer. I just want to see her play again. I miss
Yeah,
watching her play,
yeah.
right? Like I do. I think it would. I think that her time at Lyon has been tremendous for her as a player and as an
Oh man,
athlete.
really, she won a Champions League.
I mean, completely. And I think the growth of her personal game was elevated being there. Now, what's to say that that wouldn't have happened anywhere she went? But I do think that the type of athletes that she was competing alongside and playing against and winning a Champions League, that type of experience just gives you a different perspective
Yeah,
on the game and on professionalism and how to be a professional athlete. I think that it would be really cool to see her go somewhere like Barcelona, right? Like that would be fantastic for her. I think that she could also help out a team like Barca pretty in-depthly. And as you head into this World Cup year, this is a player that wants to be on the World Cup roster for the United States. I don't think that she's coming back to the NWSL or like coming to the NWSL. I think she stays in Europe for the time being, just with how her development of the game has gone so far. I think it would be beneficial for her to stay there. So I think I want to see her go to Barcelona, but who knows? I don't know what's going to
who's
happen.
well, that listen, I would love to see it, but I'm also like we're talking about we're weaving in ACL chatter
I
within
know.
some of this rumor mill stuff, but I mean that's a team that's also been dealing with injury. You know,
I
Alexa
know.
Putellas has been out and sidelined with an ACL injury, missed out on the Euros because of it.
Mhm.
My goodness, Carolyn Graham Hansen has been
I
dealing
know.
with injury as well. So it's like if they were even to get somebody like a Macario, like how does she fit in with the caliber of talent on that team? Like whose spot is he essentially taking? It's definitely piqued a lot of curiosity, my own included. But yeah, I don't know. I know there's a lot of folks that want to see, would love to see her play in NWSL, but I'm with
I
you. I don't
mean,
know if that's necessarily
I would
going to
too.
be
I would love to see her play in the
right
NWSL. I
selfishly,
call
like, yeah,
like
come
we
on
could
through.
see her in person all the time, Sandra. I would get to call games where Kat's playing, but I just don't think that's happening at this point. I don't think she's coming back to the NWSL. I don't. I think she's
Well,
staying.
she's never been here. So
I know. I'm
that's
sorry, not coming back. I don't think
yeah.
she's coming to the
That's
NWSL.
the
I
other thing
think
too. Well, yeah, no,
like
that's the other side of it too. It's like, I think folks are wondering like, well, like is this not going to be a spot for her for even in the future of her career? It'll be interesting to see. I mean, Leon also is home to Lindsay Horan right now at the moment. Her contract is going to be through at a
yep.
certain point. Um, has a contract in place with Thorns for if she does, whenever she does return. I believe it's 2025. So, listen, there's a lot to keep an eye on in terms of Leon and Americans who are overseas. So, we'll see how that pans out. I would anticipate that the chatter around that will probably get louder as that timeline for Macario's contract gets closer and closer and closer. So
And also how her recovery does, right? Like I think we'll find out a bit more um especially from Black Wananovsky, because people are always asking him in terms of like US soccer, how her recovery is doing. That's how we found out where she is on her recovery journey and that she should be back on the field by the end of February. So January camps are coming up. There's the January camp where the US will be in New Zealand. I doubt she'll be on that roster just based on her recovery, but I think that'll be an opportunity maybe where we hear her timeline to recovery. And I think that also plays a factor in some teams that are looking at her, right? Like,
how about this? Let's pivot a little bit. What if Catarina Macario had even more teams and more markets to take a look at in NWSL? Would that entice a player of her caliber